Hello, New Zealand. I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk for our 22nd episode, and there's just 47 days to go before Election Day. We have got a stack of things to talk about tonight. We're going to get straight into it. I want to welcome the panel, and we've got our four special panelists tonight. Firstly, Dr. Ate Moala in Wellington. How are you, Ate?
I'm good, thank you.
And you went to an interesting presentation. Who was the speaker last night?
Aviv Yemin, he was an awesome guy. Courage is a Jew, and he's just somebody who stands up for courage and for freedom. He's very, very good. Came to Wellington. They cancelled, the cathedral cancelled his booking, even though he'd booked for months. And then the last minute, 2 a.m. in the morning, they cancelled and said that the views were not consistent with their views, which was really sad. But good old Brian Tamaki and Destiny Church, they came to the rescue and they had a great meeting, good turnout. Very good.
And a place to host. Okay. And to Masterton, Sue Reid. How are you, Sue?
Yes, kia ora, Bob. Yes, very well. It's a bit chilly in the valley.
Always chilly in the valley, isn't it? Well, speaking of chilly, down to Christchurch, Reverend Dr. Michael Reid. Actually, Sue Reid, Michael Reid, are you two related?
No, probably some great forefathers. East Coast, Ngāti Porou as the link, but
Okay, how are you?
Well,
Michael?
look, I'm not aware of that, Bob, but possibly, you never know.
Okay.
Yeah, so good evening to you and good evening to all the other panelists.
Okay, and we've got a few sickies this week. Bruce Logan has got the dreaded lurgy. Alla is counting down. She's only got 2 weeks to go. 3 weeks, is it? Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Anyway, I've lost count. I just eat chocolates every day just to encourage her. And Cherie is still overseas, so desperate times call for desperate measures. So we've called back Ronji. Ronji, how are you, brother?
Hey, what's up, everyone? They're scraping the bottom of the barrel, getting me. So anyway, good to be back. And
Yeah,
we'll
can
see
you
how
stop talking? Because we've got to stop at 9 o'clock on the dot. Otherwise, you're going to, come and beat me up. Anyway,
I'm an old man and I need my sleep.
Exactly. Our image of the week, firstly, how can you ignore that this is the image of the week? And as a result of that particular image, he fundraised something like $20 million just on shirts and cups and images being used. And so maybe that backfired against the very people who want to kind of take him out. Here's the other image of the week in total contrast. Yes, that's the President of the United States asleep at a service, basically as he meets with survivors of the Maui fire, a horrific event. But it's quite a contrast between those two images, isn't there? Our video of the week is dating in 2023. This is for young people with the new woke rules.
She's cute.
Yeah, they are.
They? Is there another one out there?
Not just them.
Wait, how many people are you dating?
One.
She's the one.
They's the one.
Who?
Sarah.
Sarah. She's the one I just saw.
They are, yeah.
They? Are you messing with me right now?
No, but you said she.
Yeah, I know.
They are they.
They? You said it was just one.
They are one person.
So, her name's Sarah.
Their name is Sarah.
Oh, never mind. This girl.
Sarah.
Yes, Sarah. She is...
They don't go by he or she, because they are non-binary. They don't identify as one gender or the other.
Okay. I get it, sort of. So since they isn't a boy or a girl.
They don't conform to one gender, yeah.
Right. Does they still like boys or does they like girls?
They don't conform to a strict sexual identity either. They are queer.
Oh, so they're gay.
Yeah, there we go. So that's how confusing dating is in the 2023. Okay, team, let's get straight into the issues. We're not having a free speech moment. I'm shutting down free speech, labelling it as hate speech because of what you talk about. So let's talk about something else. Let's look at the latest poll that talks about what voters are thinking about. This is the latest One News Varian poll, and they asked eligible voters what would influence their vote the most. You can see their cost of living. 48% of people say that's the most influential thing on how they vote. Crime and healthcare, both around 13 to 14%. Look at that. Climate change just at 7%. Don't tell the Greens that. Tax cuts at just 6% and education at 3%. Question for the panel. Do you agree with those findings? And do you think there's issues in that list that should be there? Ronji, we haven't heard from you for a while. So what do you think about that? Those survey results? Do you think they're accurate?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the results. I sort of think that I am surprised though that education and healthcare aren't higher in the list. And I've sort of noticed that housing isn't in that list, housing related issues, but I guess it's probably lumped in there into the cost of living stuff.
Yeah, that's true. It would be around that cost of living. So that's rent, that's shopping. I mean, that's possibly, is that tax rates, paying too much of our taxes to the government who are throwing it away? Maybe?
Yeah, that's all mortgage interest rates and all of the inflation that's come there. So I think that's probably why it's lumped into there, but it's not standalone as an issue, which I find surprising.
And so who do you think, Ronji, who do you think's making the best noises around those key issues of cost of living, crime and healthcare? Or is it all just
no
noise?
one really? Yeah, no one really. I don't think anyone's giving any real good answers or solutions to some of the economic challenges that we have. I think it's still quite ideological. They're coming from their different ideological bases. And so I don't think there's any real innovation or real answers and real solutions that are being presented. It's sort of just still petty populist politics. So I think we have to wait and see how it unpacks and unfolds in the near future.
Okay, Sue, were you surprised by those results? You're pretty predictable.
I was actually really surprised. Well, no, I wasn't surprised. I was actually quite pleased that we've got sensible people out there who you can see that climate change isn't first and foremost in a lot of people's minds. Most people are trying to balance the books in their household, whether you're middle class or find things. A lot of people are finding it hard to make it stretch that little bit further, just inch by inch. A little bit more is harder to do. And I filled up my petrol the other day and just thought, I normally put in that. Gee, I'll have to put a bit more in next time. That didn't quite go as far. So just sort of stretching. But, when people are trying to pay bills and trying to keep a household functioning and families, I don't know how a lot of families, to be perfectly honest, how they do it. It is hard, and that's a constant pressure. And, that's just hard for people. And so the climate change isn't going to be at the forefront of their thinking.
Okay, in your view, is any party making good noises around cost of living, crime and healthcare, or is it all just a muddle from all the parties?
I just, like Ronji says, I think they're just sort of sticking there saying, we've got to get the economy going. And that's all very well, but, just show us how you're going to do that. Where's the vision and where do you want to take New Zealand? And I think that there is an issue missing from that list, and that is under the banner of freedoms, that there's three parts to it. There's three areas of freedoms: the freedom, the fallout from the mandates, the free speech, and freedom of faith. And we're not hearing anyone talk about those things. In fact, they are working very hard in collusion with the media to shut that all down.
Okay. Ate, do you agree with the poll results? Do you think the cost of living is the biggest concern?
I'm not surprised about that because of the state of our economy. The current Labour government has completely stuffed things up, and the mess in our economy. So people are concerned about that, as Sue and Ronji has mentioned. I'm not surprised also that education is only 3%, which is a reflection of the voters not thinking about the next generation and having a vision of the future. It's all about them struggling now, but there's absolutely no vision for the future of the next generation, which is disappointing but not surprising.
Any parties, in your view, making good noises around cost of living, crime and healthcare?
No, it's all talk, it's all politics. Labour can't do anything about that, no matter all the stuff they're talking about, and I'm not having full confidence in the National have got a clear direction of where to go from here.
Okay. Michael, what do you think? Is the poll reflect what you think people are saying at ground level?
Oh, I think so, Bob. I think, every time we go to the supermarket, or as Sue said, go to fill up the car, we are reminded just how frightfully expensive everything is. And, and indeed it is a struggle to make ends meet, and high mortgages and insurance rates. It's just incredibly tough for families. Crime, of course, with the ram raids and the attacks on shopkeepers, and everywhere you go in large supermarkets or in shopping centres, you see big bollards and blocks of concrete and stone everywhere. It's just a not so subtle reminder that crime and ram raids are certainly, affecting communities everywhere. But Bob, I think too, for 6 years we've had a government that's been ideologically very driven, and suddenly it's starting to try and reconnect with the electorate by talking about, and I think the phrases for both Christophers is we're talking about issues that matter to New Zealanders. So you could say of Chris Hipkins, well, haven't you been doing that for 6 years? And the answer is probably no. I mean, incredible hubris and arrogance with this government, with its ideological agenda and social areas. His speech yesterday, and I know you'll come back to this, but his speech yesterday, we're not going to talk about culture wars, but I will talk about culture wars. He realises that that's actually an issue for people. What is a woman? What does it mean to be a human being? Is a pretty basic question. But his government has been on an ideological pathway, and suddenly, all of a sudden, trying to reconnect with ordinary people and their ordinary experience. And I think all the parties are doing that. I don't think any of them are doing it really well. They're just trotting out the sort of cliches, and both the main leaders seem to latch onto this phrase, we're interested in issues that matter to real New Zealanders. Well, where have they been in the last 6 years?
Actually, Ronji, part of the reason you haven't been with us is that you've been doing missionary work in parts of Asia. Did you feel safe in those countries? Was it different?
Yeah, I guess I've been there several times, so it's sort of quite normal, quite used to traveling to those parts of the world. And so, I guess to answer your question directly, I felt safe. The food was cool. We're with local friends, and we're eating what they're eating and sleeping where they're sleeping. And so I guess I come back to New Zealand. I did spend some time in Australia for this lawyer scholarship that I won, which I found really fascinating because it's similar issues to Australia and the similar sort of weak politics that's happening in Australia as well. But I was really encouraged by the work of groups like Freedom for Faith and other groups that are really advocating for the freedom stuff that Sue was talking about, but also really getting stuck into some of those key areas that people do care about, the new conversion therapy laws that New South Wales is starting to do, all of that kind of stuff. I think I was encouraged that they were actually wrestling with the things that many New Zealanders are thinking about, but actually don't know how to articulate or work in or discuss with other people.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Here's the poll of polls over the last 2 years. So basically what Stuff did was they took the average of One News poll, the News Hub poll, the Courier poll, the Talbot Mills poll, and the Guardian poll, and they came up with this graph, which is probably a bit hard to digest immediately. Actually, team, I don't think I sent this to you, so I'm springing this one on you, but that's okay. Let me just show you a couple of trends. Over the last 2 years, this is a trend of the Labour Party. Over the last 2 years, this is a trend of the National Party. This is the trend of the Green Party. This is the trend of the ACT Party. And finally, this is the trend of New Zealand First. So you can sort of see of the two major parties, National have definitely increased, but they've sort of plateaued. But Labour is in free fall. And I think, the danger for them is that it's self-realise that they just keep falling and they go below that 30%, and that's almost the death knell for them. Ate, does any of those graphs surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I'm expecting Labour to, go out there forever. The only way that they could come back in if Winston Peter does his trick that he did in 2017, because he won. If they end up doing a coalition with Green, and so we can't not say that he won't do that, because he likes power. So I'm not expecting Labour to win, but of course, if they end up having a coalition with Green and Winston Peters, then can't rule that out also.
Well, it sounds like Labour doesn't want New Zealand First, New Zealand First doesn't want Labour, but do we believe them? Sue, what do you think about the trend lines?
Yeah, I think they're on track, and they're definitely showing those trends. That's reflected also in the polls. And it's just interesting looking at the Greens had quite a few spikes there, and just wondering what sort of issues were around at the time that caused some of those big drops. And I think ACT also had a couple of big drops, and I think it'd be interesting, why did they peak and why did they trough? So be interesting to have a look around post the parliamentary protest, how those parties fared, because that the reaction to that to voters, their voters were out there, and electorate MPs, they had their voters out there. So interesting to see what those issues would be that caused those to drop. But I think that as they tell us more about their policy, you might see a few more spikes. But I think it's going along pretty much the trends of where we're falling at the moment. The interesting one will be watching the New Zealand First. And it seems to be a race between New Zealand First and Te Pāti Māori by the looks of things down there on that graph too.
Yeah, that's the one to watch. Ronji, do you think Labor can stop that? Whoops, not that one. That one. Do you think Labor can stop that slide? Because it seems to be a free fall slide.
Yeah, I don't think it can stop it, but I'm also mindful that New Zealand voters that have notoriously been had short memories, and I think that's one of the challenges. I think that's why politicians. I think one of the things that I noticed about the National Party is they haven't been able to capitalise on how bad Labour's been doing, and they sort of plateaued there. So I think that sort of shows that if they're going to win the election, National and ACT, they really do need to remind New Zealanders about how bad it's been for the last 6 years. The other thing I was really interested in is how good ACT has been in capitalising on those problems that Labour had and National have. So I think they're playing smart politics. I think strategy, clever politics are being shown here from ACT, and the other parties, especially National, aren't doing a good job in capitalising.
Yeah, actually, Brenda said, can we see the New Zealand First graph again? So, that's the one. That's New Zealand First. So if you look at the trend line, it's definitely increasing, but it certainly goes through some ups and downs. Michael, any surprises amongst those graphs?
Oh, no, Bob, not at all. In fact, I think what Ronji just said, people's memories, I think what's happened in the last 3 years particularly has been pretty unprecedented in my lifetime. I think those parliamentary protests were just absolutely huge. The whole rural sector has really been alienated under this government, and people will not forget. On all this talk from Chris Hipkins about connecting with ordinary New Zealanders and real issues, I think it's just too little too late. I think, Bob, if they had continued with Jacinda Ardern, who was their stardust, then there would have been almost, and it's a moot point, but possibly a complete reversal of their big majority in 2020. Could have been completely reversed, a little bit like Norm Kirk's majority in 72 when Labor absolutely, stole the election. And then he died, of course, and Rob Muldoon came in, and it was the National landslide in 75. So, there's some history here. I think Labor's aware of that. They dumped Jacinda Ardern, or she decided to leave, probably a bit of both. And Hipkins is possibly in a situation where Bill Rowling might have been in 1975. He's fighting a rearguard action to try and keep Labor buoyant. But no, it's pretty predictable. People won't forget, Bob. This has been serious upheaval in people's lives. Yeah. And
I was just going to say, you're showing your age here. I mean, I don't think Ronji's even heard of Norman Kirk. Have you, Ronji?
Oh, come on. I've got degrees in politics. But I read it through Wikipedia, so that's all right. That's okay.
Okay, let's just check out a couple of the comments. We've got some good ones here. Craig says our climate change obligations are set to increase petrol prices by another 22 cents a litre before Christmas. So that relates to the cost of living. Sure does. Rick says National and ACT are woke leftists masquerading as conservative parties. Well, masquerading as social conservative parties might be more accurate. Son on the Ascendant, interesting name, says Labor is unrecognisable. I'm sure a few loyal voters would feel betrayed by their ideological stance. They used to be a party for ordinary workers. Now they don't know what a woman is. Ronnie says, I want to know why ACT is being frozen out of legacy media coverage. Is it? I'm not sure that's correct. And New Zealand First Signal is now being boosted. That's an interesting comment. Not sure if I agree with that. And this classic from Liam, voting, pick the flaccid, supine, vertebrate leadership of your choice. So those lovely words anyway. I'm not sure what it means. Right, next topic, team. Senior MP and former Minister of National, Michael Woodhouse, claims that a diversity drive in the National Party has cost him basically his career. He currently runs in Dunedin, which he never wins. And he was about number 19 on the list, but he has plummeted down to the mid-50s. And so he really hasn't got a chance. And so he told the Otago Daily Times there was a contest between diversity and experience. And in his case, diversity won because he's experienced. And there's a group of hardworking male MPs who have been given positions in the mid-50s, which puts them at a very significant disadvantage. Now, the article in the ODT was headlined, "Being Male Cost Me My Position," according to Woodhouse, but Woodhouse has actually denied saying that. Now, remember, this is the Otago Daily Times who cancelled our What is a Woman advert at the last minute, so they may have problems with accuracy in biology. But in National, there are 21 women and 19 men in National's top 40. Just before I come to the panel as to whether National is going woke with its diversity, here's the ups and downs. So Scott Simpson, Stuart Smith, Simon O'Connor and Sam Uffindale, all cis white males, have plummeted. And non-MPs, who you probably haven't heard of, Nancy Liu, Suze Redmayne, Katie Nimmin and Catherine Wedd, are quite high up on the list. Now, my conclusion is that if your first name starts with S, you haven't got a chance in the National Party, but I'm not sure if that's actually accurate. So, team, let's find out. Has National gone woke? What do you reckon, Ronji? Is Michael Woodhouse, who actually campaigned with us a little bit against for the no vote on the cannabis legalisation and spoke at Otago with a guest speaker that we had in the country, really good guy and a reasonable voting record. So has National gone woke and wants to meet the diversity demands?
Look, I'll be honest, I don't think National's gone woke. I think National is woke. I think that's the reality, and that's what's coming out. Look, I don't think this is about a war on white cis men, to be honest. I think this is about good strategy. It's good politics, because diversity equals good politics, because the population is diverse. And so National's just trying to play the game like every other political party to get as many different faces, different perspectives to try and engage middle New Zealand, the ones who vote. And so I think it's actually not about going woke. I mean, National, all parties are woke to some degree. I think it really is about strategy, politics, and trying to win the election.
Okay. Michael, do you agree with that?
I think National went woke a very long time ago. And in fact, I've said before on the program, Bob, they're trying to out-woke the left. I think the Liberal faction, in terms of moral issues in National, have said things that are just appalling, that any Labour or Green MP would be proud of. And I think National's completely woke, and social conservatives would struggle to support them. There are some good voices there, of course, some very faithful people, some good people. But I think Michael Woodhouse, he's been a steady pair of hands. He's certainly not a stellar performer. He's a list MP. He inhabits a very red area in Dunedin. So things are up against him. But I think, this idea of diversity, Bob, it's just gone absolutely berserk. Why do you have to have a certain quota of Māori or women MPs? Why? Why not, the old idea of a meritocracy and somebody who's actually going to do the job? We've lost that, and we get these diversity quotas in business, and it's just crazy, really. So I think what Ronji said is true. I think National's just sort of falling into line with prevailing ideological views, and it's quite sad, really.
Okay, well, they want to increase the women quota. Before I come to the women on the panel, I just want to show you, Sue, I know you're a big News Talk ZB fan. You listen a lot, and I sometimes hear you even ring up. I was fascinated by what Heather Duplessis-Allen said about this whole issue and about the need for diversity and the media pushing it. Just have a watch of this short clip.
Now, personally, I hate this stuff because I would hate anyone to think that I got any breaks because I was a woman, but this is how it works in politics. Parties have to play the diversity game now. They have to play because the media play. The media are obsessed with whether political parties or corporates or whoever have enough women or Māori or people of colour or members of the rainbow community. And if that is what the media care about, then that is what the media will write the stories and the headlines about, and therefore it becomes an easy way for opponents to attack the party.
Well, there we go. I thought she was pretty accurate, and I noticed most of you were nodding your head. Sue, do you agree with her?
Yes, sadly. I mean, if I was in a position, given a position in a company, I would want to know that I was there because I had the right skill set and I was valued for the things that I could bring to a company. I would not want to be there on false pretenses under a diversity banner. And what are you having a diversity banner at the expense of great experience? And I think that's what we've seen with the dropping of the list of those men in the list, a lot of experience. And I think that if National get across the line with their team, they're going to need a lot of that experience. And I just would not like to it's always got to be about the right person for the job. And I think it's insulting to women to just be a token measure because you're a woman. I mean, most politicians can't even decide what a woman is. So I just think that, Luxon's got a rule book, and I think too there's a bit of personal wrangling going on there that if you don't fit his bill, if you don't fit to his rule book, he's punishing them, and I don't think that that's a very healthy thing to have in the National Party as well. So I just think women should be there for the right reasons, and it should always be the right person.
Okay, you agree with that, Ate?
I agree that National has been woke for many years, and there's no difference between their Liberal views. It's exactly the same as Labour. So, we saw how they got rid of their Conservative MPs. And with regard to diversity, it's absolute nonsense. As Sue said, you want to get people who's got experience and wisdom. And I just suspect that they probably won some yes people, probably Luxon and his deputy, probably won some inexperienced yes people so that they can just rule the party. And they probably don't want people who stand up and who's got experience. So I think it's, I don't know, that's my sense.
Okay, that's a National candidate. Let's move on to ACT. An ACT candidate has resigned. Her historical comments comparing COVID-19 vaccine mandates to Nazi concentration camps came to light. Now, this is what she actually said, because I went searching for it because it really wasn't reported. But this is what the post said by the ACT candidate, ex-ACT candidate. She said, if you're wondering how the Nazis were able to come into power and do all the horrific things that they did, well, you are looking at the start of the process right here. So, Mr. Seymour, when can we expect those who are unvaccinated to start wearing armbands? When can we expect to see concentration camps and re-education camps? When can we start expecting to see troops on our street rounding up people? And in another post, she also told Seymour that he needed to have the, what was that word that I told you not to say, Ate? Yeah, BALLS, to front up to the people outside Parliament. Yeah, thank you, Ronji. I knew you'd say it. So Seymour said her comments were unacceptable. Asked if he was concerned about ACT candidates having extreme views, David Seymour said he was more concerned about people feeling unable to speak freely, apparently. He said, I actually think we've got a real problem with these almost purity tests about people's thinking. Sometimes it's somebody's got to call. Sometimes it's good to have people with a range of views. There's some views that I don't agree with and some that I actually find unacceptable. So go figure, she's now an ex-MP for the ACT Party. Do you think she is suitable to be an MP for saying things like that? Sue, do you think she qualifies?
Yeah, I think that you got to remember that in the time that she was saying that, there was a lot of totalitarian stuff going on. And I think when that sort of thing happens, we can reflect back on other times in history when totalitarian regimes and power plays, and it is easy to use those metaphors to explain what's going on and the frustrations with that. And so they were really hard. But it's they're playing a political game and just calling this out. They don't seem to want to stand up for freedoms, and yet David Seymour was pitching himself as the free speech. I nearly said free range, free speech guru.
Chicken.
So, is he advocating free speech, or he seems to have muzzled one of his MPs? And I think in the correct context of what she said, I think she probably had a lot to bring to the party.
Yeah. Ronji, do you think it's just because of the fact that the quote brings in alignment with the Nazis and what they did? Do you think that that's always a bad imagery to use and that's always going to get you in trouble, even if the rest of what you say is accurate?
Yeah, potentially. But I also think it points to the fact that we live in such a fragile society that we can't use some of those examples and not refer to them, and how some of those principles or applications might be relevant to today. I think, again, it just shows good politics from Seymour. I think it just shows him being a clever strategist. He's dropped the candidate. He probably forced them out. And I think that sucks, because whether you agree with the candidate's views or not, but isn't that the beauty of Parliament, that people's different views can be represented, and that you can vote for people that you align with values, views-wise, and so on, and you can have that sort of true diversity in Parliament. So, again, I think the theme for me in your topics tonight, Bob, is this is all politics. These are just good strategies, good politics, because people.
Oh, there we are.
The bread and butter issues that people really have. They're just saying stuff that they're saying whatever they can to try and win the election.
Okay. And funny thing was, Ronji, that you just cut out a little bit just as the internet went down, as you said was going to in your office at 8:30 on the dot. So, but you're still with us, so we got what you said. Michael, is ACT going way too sensitive, and going trawling for old comments like this is always going to find any candidate in trouble?
I think it probably is, Bob. I think what Ronji said is correct. It's all politics, really. Seymour, in the present environment, probably had to take the action he did. But it's sad, really, because, we learn from history, or the old quote is that the only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn anything from history. And it is political suicide to make any reference to the Nazi Party, which is unfortunate, because the lessons are there. And I think those points you made, Sue, about the totalitarian things that have been happening in the last few years are very real. And there are some parallels there. But, to refer to the Nazi Party particularly is just a death warrant for an EMP, I think. And it shouldn't be, Bob, really. But it is an extreme thing to say when we understand the atrocities that occurred in the concentration camps. I mean, it's a very, very risky parallel to draw, and certainly an inflammatory one. But on the other hand, we should be able to learn from history, and the curtailing of people's freedoms and the shutting down of free speech are important issues, and they were a factor in every totalitarian regime's rise to power. So, at what point can we draw from the past and references in history? It just seems that the Nazi thing in this age of critical race theory, it's just a bridge too far for any politician. We can't talk about it at all. I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, it just concerns me that.
I don't think the comments that were made in context, which you showed us, there's some very valid points there. But it's just unfortunate that there was a reference to the Nazi Party. It's not the only totalitarian regime in history, and maybe if there'd been reference to some other party or country in its history, it might have been okay. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it concerns me that this was quite an emotional time for the whole country. There was a lot going on if people can't express some of that emotion. And I mean, look, politicians were guilty of it as well. I mean, Michael Wood, the Labour MP, he said that the people outside on Parliament lawns were a river of filth. Does that mean that he's disqualified from being an MP? That's the problem. Ate, the danger is that, interestingly, David Seymour says that, we need to stop applying this purity test to candidates. We need real people, and occasionally real people say something that they need to apologise for. But at the same time, she's an ex-candidate for ACT. It just doesn't make sense, does it?
David Seymour is a hypocrite. If he's talking about being sensitive, what about these murderous laws that he pushed through with euthanasia? What about voting for abortion up to birth? What's the difference between that and killing whole generations? In fact, the government overreach in New Zealand around the mandates is absolutely disgusting. The loss of lives and the loss of people's livelihood. So we can't sort of pretend that there's no huge government overreach. In fact, there's some people who have started to refer to New Zealand as North Korea or communist China. So we can't sort of try and talk as if that, it's not happening. So, he's a bully to get rid of this, MP just because she's, calling out what he's done. I mean, how can he, start saying you can't say this and then he pass a law to murder the older people and teenagers with depression for many years. So, I think the hypocrisy needs to stop. I mean, if that's possible, I don't think it's possible with these MPs.
Okay, let's just check some comments. Watching You says, remember it was silence and compliance that kept the German Socialist Nationalist Party doing what they did. And Francis says, our kids are switched on and always vote, like us, their parents. They are undecided on who to vote for. A conundrum. May have to wait until the last minute to decide this time around. So some interesting discussions going on amongst families. Just before the next topic, quick advertisement. Just a reminder that the resource is out, valueyourvote.nz, and you can find out how the politicians have voted, and also the party leaders have been given a list of questions on a whole lot of moral issues. Now, we have printed 75,000 copies, and 2/3 of those are already committed and out the door. So you need to order them. You can do it from our website. You just go to valueyourvote.nz, and there's a website. Your values, your voice, your votes. It's a great website, and it's a great pamphlet. So there's our sponsorship advertising. We'll send the bill to them. Valueyourvote.nz. Team, we're just staying with David Seymour because I want to ask a really important question about what he said. And the question is he a comedian? Now, he has faced criticism from all sides of politics after he joked about his fantasy of sending Guy Fawkes into the Ministry for Pacific Peoples because he thinks they're wasting money, and they spent $40,000, was it, on a farewell party for one of the staff. Now, Seymour said that he doesn't resolve from the comment because to do so would give currency to the idea he was being serious. He even thinks it could be funny if people started joking about blowing up an ACT Party conference. Chris Hipkins says Seymour should be ashamed of himself. Nationals Nicola Willis distanced themselves from Seymour. Christopher Luxon said he supported the Ministry for Pacific Peoples. And Green co-leader James Shaw said the comment was dangerous. Even when we claim we're making a joke, our words can cause serious harm. And elected representatives have a particular responsibility to understand this. That's what James Shaw said. This is exactly, once again, team, I want to put it in context. This is what he said.
In my fantasy, we'd send a guy called Guy Fawkes in there and it'll be all over, but we'll probably have to have a more formal approach than that.
Okay, so he doesn't like the Ministry of Pacific Affairs, but he makes a statement like that, a throwaway line. Let's go to the two Pacifica representatives on the panel. Because they'll be most exercised about this. Ronji, what do you reckon? Is David Seymour just being funny and we need to chill out, or is he winding people up badly?
Thank you for following diversity rules and coming to the brown people first. I think look, I have my own personal issues with the Ministry of Pacific Peoples in terms of their delivery and their work, and in terms of things that Pacifica people desperately need. And so I acknowledge the challenges there. It was a joke, man. It was a dumb joke. It was a mistimed joke. again, it shows the fragility that New Zealanders have at the moment. And the thing that cracks me up is how gutless the politicians were, because they all tried to distance themselves and all of a sudden become a bunch of virtue signalers and say, well, look how precious we are and look how good we are. And we're with this and with that, we're supporting MPP and so on. So, look, I just thought it was just a symptom again of how fragile and dry and sort of boring politics and politicians can be, and it's sort of reflective of what's happening in our society, that we can't even have it was a dumb joke, it was a stink joke, but it's a joke.
Do you think it's a problem when the ministry, which is representing families who are really struggling at the moment, spend $40,000 on a farewell party? Do you think that is an issue that we should be concerned about?
You asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a stupid waste of money, and that's sort of endemic of some of the other ways that public money has been used by that ministry. But it's not just that ministry. I think it's across the board in all government departments, and the way that they've been pissing away public money. It's not government money; it's public money. So I think that's the problem. But that whole thing around the 40K that went to the CEO, look, it was dumb. It was not a good look. And again, it wasn't the kind of look that you need when so many Pacific people are struggling in homelessness and in the prison population and welfare and all of those kinds of things. We need better. And this was just a joke. It was a mistimed joke, but it's still just a joke. So handle it like that.
Okay. Ate, do you agree?
I'm not sure whether it was a joke. I think, to highlight Pacific people, I totally agree that it was silly to waste that money, but accountability is a major problem with this government. As I mentioned before, people are living in hotels for, since the lockdown, and it's coming up 4 years. There's no incentive for people to work. Restaurants don't find people to come in and serve because they get more money just being on the dole. So there's so much money that is being spent by this government. Absolutely irresponsible, no accountability. And, this, 40,000 is just another example. But with regard to David Seymour, I don't know whether he knows when is the joke and not a joke. I don't trust him.
Okay. Michael, was it a joke?
Oh, look, I think it is. I think I agree with Ronji on this one. Yeah, it was pretty dumb probably, but he wasn't actually trying to beat up on Pacific peoples. He would have said that about any government department that had thrown a party of $40,000. It's profligate waste in the public sector, and that is an issue that ACT has been, and Seymour, of course, in particular, has been railing on about for a long time, and I think it resonates with a lot of New Zealanders. It wasn't a particularly sensitive thing to say, but in a woke environment, you're not allowed to say anything, really. And I think a lot of it's not a good thing to say, Bob. You don't blow up anyone. I mean, there are mad people out there that do go up blowing things, and it's just it is a dumb thing to say. But he's on the campaign trail. He's being followed by media everywhere. They'll pick up on things. What about Marama Davidson and the Greens comment about cis white men and violence? Yeah. Did that get the same sort of treatment and criticism? Probably not from the current sort of media. So, yeah.
Actually, I think it was the Green MP Golriz Garaman who's turned up to Posey Parker's rally with a sign saying ready to stomp TERFs or ready to go to war with TERFs or something like that. It was quite a aggressive sign. You could take it that way.
Well, there's militancy from the left activists who can get away with saying all sorts of things, but because Seymour represents the right of politics and a libertarian view, probably, and it's his personality. He has a bit of a cheeky personality. He's good on the sound bites, and he is saying some things that even conservatives would like. Although the libertarian ethos is of real concern, and I think what has been said about him in relation to abortion and euthanasia is unforgivable, really. But he's mastering the soundbite. He's out on the campaign trail. He's saying things that sometimes go a little awry. But I would agree with Ronji. I think really that, let's get over it. I mean, a free society, Bob, is one where it's safe to be unpopular. And I think that's a really important quote. That's what we've lost. And any politician, of course, they're humans, and they're going to make flaws and say dumb things. But do we hang them out to dry for that? No, let's look at their policies. Let's look at what's driving them. And in the case of ACT, they've been very effective in their criticism of the present government, and a lot of the things that are said are very valid and true. But it's a hard libertarian ethos, really, that should be of concern to social conservatives.
Okay. There is actually a bit of disagreement amongst our commenters. Kevin says Seymour is not a comedian. He's a politician in the mould of Sir Rob Muldoon, the master of sarcasm. Mihi says, no, agree, Ate, not a joke. But Urwi says, Rawiri Waste, he said he'd poisoned David Seymour at one stage, which I think is correct. So, yeah, it's got to be consistent across the board. Okay, team, the Wi-Fi has died where Ronji was, so he is in a permanent state of prayer, just if you wondered. What happens is when they go off, they freeze. So he is just praying for us. So just receive the prayer and love. It'll be the most intelligent thing Ronji has said all night. Next topic, team. The government is, he's going to get me for that. The government is facing accusations of manipulating news narratives. They paid TVNZ, this is the government, paid TVNZ and Stuff advertising for hand-picked experts in their news segments and platforms. The government spent $200,000 last year with Stuff, $300,000 with TVNZ. Remember, this is your money. It included an hour-long prime-time climate special on TV1, 5 articles on One News, 5 social media posts, and a week's worth of interviews with climate and energy experts on Breakfast TV. Does anybody watch that still? And 7 Sharp, well, once again, 7 Sharp interview with an EECA ambassador. And you may not have realised this was even government funded. There wasn't actually that much notice that this was government funded. Panel, is this pure political propaganda? Are you worried that the government is actually paying for news items in our media? And actually, I should just give a disclaimer on this particular one. During the cannabis referendum, the coalition for the no vote, you can actually buy stories in newspapers, but it is very clear. So actually we were reporting on what Ronji had to say about the reason we shouldn't legalise cannabis. But we had, I know that Ken, who was handling our social media and our marketing campaign, he was working overtime to meet the requirements of the New Zealand Herald that it clearly stated it was an advertisement article. It was written by us. We were obviously coming with a bias because we were wanting to promote a no vote, and they went overboard. Now, the problem is that the government is promoting these stories in the media funded by the taxpayer, and they're not actually acknowledging that it's coming from the government. It all sounds really, really sneaky. So you've been involved in the media. What do you reckon?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk from MPs at the moment when they're talking about crime, or they're asked about crime, and they say, "Oh, can't possibly comment on that." There's a very clear distinction between the judiciary and government, but in this case, they're hypocrites, and that they're very, very entrenched into the media, and they have invested interests, and the dollars are free flowing, and would we call it corrupt? Perhaps, but I think it's unhealthy. Because it is shutting down that debate and any counter viewpoints, and I think that's a troubling trend. And it's in this environment of the tight tax dollars of what we're going to spend, it's very frivolous, and it's almost an insult to hardworking taxpayers that they're funding these sort of messages and putting the money into these sorts of things. But where's the line between the media and the politicians? And I think there's some deals going on, and I think so I think that they have a lot to answer for, really.
Okay, Ate, you think we should be concerned about this, or if they make it clear it's a government talking, we can discern whether we believe it or not?
I think to most people it's pretty obvious that it's a government political propaganda. It's sick, absolutely sick. They use the taxpayers' money to fund their narrative, and this has been, it's been worse since the since the lockdown and the pandemic, where it's just one narrative, and then now it's with the campaigns, where you just see lots of the taxpayers' money going into Labour and National. This is unfair, but I mean, I'm not surprised at all. But everybody can see it.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, concerned?
Oh, look, I'm going to call this what it is. It's corrupt, Bob. This is a very serious problem with our mainstream media, and I've mentioned this before. We've talked about it on the show here. This Public Interest Journalism Fund, which gave $55 million to supposedly struggling media organisations, couldn't self-sustain, and but before you get a cent, you have to sign up to the government's narrative on things. And this is a real concern, because we don't have a fourth estate that is objective and fair and balanced. Hillary and Jeremy are now for sale, effectively. And 7 Sharp is anything but. It's just awful. I mean, it's lowbrow, and breakfast is arguably even worse. But it's not informing us. It's not doing what a fourth estate should. And then, to add insult to injury, it's our money to indoctrinate us with the government's views on things. And we talked before about totalitarian regimes, but this is exactly how they work. And this is our money. This is money from our pockets, and it's being used to push and peddle a particular view of the government. And this is just so seriously wrong. What's happened to the ethical standards of journalists? Well, we do know the answer to that there are groups that are set up, like Reality Check Radio and the Platform and others, that are saying this is just so wrong. We have to draw a line in the sand, and we're going to give everyone a fair deal. We're going to hear different points of view, which is exactly what mainstream media should be doing. But if the government is paying for content, Bob, this is really serious, I think, actually. And it's a symptom, sadly, of the times in which we live.
Yep. Okay, let's keep moving, team. Interesting story last week was that Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, he said he told everybody he was working from hospital while his young daughter was getting treatment for a blood condition. He posted on social media that his 2 children both have a blood condition called von Willebrand syndrome. Is that how you say it, Ate? It's a clotting disorder. And Hipkins has always said he wants to keep his children out of the limelight. Now, some commentators criticised him for suddenly wanting to talk about them during the campaign. I actually tweeted, "Good decision, Dad, family first." But some people pushed back on me and said, well, why does he talk about them now? It's purely for politics. I mean, I gave him credit that he didn't include photos of the kids. He didn't name the children. He simply said that he was caring for his children because they were sick, and I thought that was a good public announcement, because most people would expect him to be out on the campaign trail. Michael, do you think he was, releasing this information cynically for political purposes, or do you think just being a good dad?
Well, Bob, on this particular occasion, I mean, you can never divorce him and his office from politics, but I think he actually, unless I'm reading this wrong, he actually did put his family first on this occasion. But it's just, I find it really interesting that his predecessor, Jacinda Ardern, always was going on about children and children's issues and reducing child poverty. But he's been absolutely silent on children and their welfare, except for this. But no, I actually think, I think he was being genuine, saying, look, I'm not going to be on the campaign trail because I'm attending to the needs of my children. So, I could be wrong, but that's how I read it.
Okay, Sue, how did you read it? Did you think it was a fair call that he made?
Yes, politicians are human. I've said that before, and this shows a very human side. And there are good reasons to keep your children, or even sometimes your spouse, out of politics. And it can be a brutal game. But I think he was very honest. And children, pay a bit of a price too with their father being away, and they probably were quite grateful and happy to have their father in the midst when they're going through that sort of, it's hard going through hospital procedures. And so, he was just being dad, and I think that's a very human response, and I'll give him that that point.
Okay, Ata, you're going to be nice and loving on this one?
I'm always loving, Bob. I don't think that you can just flip from all of a sudden saying you keep your children out of the limelight and not talk about them, and all of a sudden, well, when we are on the campaign trail, to pull out this. It's fine to say that, but it just doesn't quite fit. I think he's a bit of a hypocrite, and I can't help but think of Biden. All of a sudden, he disappears into the cave or go to the beach. I don't know.
Okay, let's go into the next one, because we've given Hipkins a thumbs up for that. But he did a speech yesterday telling us what we already knew, that he was only going to work with Greens and Te Pāti Māori, and apparently he's not going to work with New Zealand First. Now, Winston has already said that long ago. He's not going near Labour. So this was all a bit of a yawn fest. But what was worse about what was said yesterday is how Hipkins defined the key policy planks of Labour. Have a watch, just two little excerpts from what he said. It's pretty nauseating.
The National Party has many MPs and candidates who want to roll back women's rights. Members of their caucus celebrated the US Supreme Court decision to roll back a woman's right to choose. I voted to legalise abortion in our first term, and I'll continue to defend a woman's right to choose. Ever since its formation over 100 years ago, the Labour Party has been the party for progress in New Zealand. We stand for a worker's right to a fair deal and for a woman's right to choose. I am a leader who is in it for you, whether you're Māori, Pacifica, Pākehā, gay, straight, born here, migrated here, a man, a woman, trans, young, old, or different in your own way. I am in it for you.
Yeah, so he says he's in it for women, but he can't define them. And note that abortion, the right to kill the unborn child, is a key policy plank of Labour. The media then used this to rush off to Christopher Luxon to find out if he had any spine on the issue. This is just as nauseating to watch.
Well, as I've been really clear about it, there'll be no change to any of our abortion laws, funding or access. I've been really clear about that. That is not our focus in government. We need to be focused on rebuilding this economy. We need to make sure we restore law and order, deliver better health and education. That is what New Zealanders want us to do. Those are the priorities for New Zealanders, and that's where our focus is as well.
Would you still sooner resign than change abortion access?
Absolutely.
Yep, so the media would have been very pleased with themselves to get this declaration again out of Christopher Luxon. I'm not sure what question to ask, team. I mean, neither of them are willing to stand for the unborn child, even though they say they want to fix New Zealand, and they're in it for us, apparently. Ate, I'm a bit scared to come to you because I know you're going to blow some steam and your blood pressure's going up right now. I mean, what's your response when you hear them, both of them, speak like that? I mean, both Chris's.
Yeah, New Zealand has become a very unsafe place for the babies. It used to be Labour with their liberal murder up to birth, but now with National and as I said before, I said in the in Parliament when they had the debate, all the free debates, and just see the deputy to Chris Luxon, a lady, just talk about abortion as if just a bit of tissue. But if we continue at this, there may be no one living in New Zealand if they continue on with killing the babies and killing their, euthanasia. Good luck to what kind of New Zealand is it. Definitely not a role model for the next generation. I'm disgusted.
Yeah. Michael, it's pretty depressing to watch, isn't it?
Look, I just think those clips are just some of the worst I've seen for a long time, Bob. We've all seen a lot, but they're just terrible, really, and there's no differentiation between the two. I think what Ate was referring to was the Amy Adams speech. She's now left Parliament, but she was a senior National MP, and she made a speech in defence of the abortion law change, which was just horribly nauseating.
And also Nicola Willis, the current National Deputy. Yeah, Nicola Willis is very.
I mean, as we were saying
abortion.
before, Bob, the Liberal side of National, which is very strong now socially, Chris Bishop and and Nicola Willis and many, many others. They're just saying things that any Labour MP would say, and it's just truly horrible. We do not have an ethic that respects human life now. And to hear Luxon talk about the economy, well, you won't have people round. You won't have an economy if you don't have a vibrant birth rate and so forth, and you're killing off your older people. I mean, it's just, for him to say, look, we're focusing on issues that really matter to New Zealand as well, that's profoundly untrue and very sad.
Yeah. So, I mean, the media would be stoked that they got commitments from both of them, very strong pro-abortion mainstream media, haven't we? So they'd be glad.
Yeah, they got their sound bites, and that'll entrench Christopher Luxon, and I think he's very firm on that. He's said that many times, and so he's backed up by Nicola Willis and, as you say, Chris Bishop. It's that rule book, that playbook I was talking about before. He's got a set of ideals, and if you do not subscribe to those, then you're gouged. And this is the problem with National. They have gouged the Conservative voter. And I just noted too that on Chris Hipkins' list, he said he's in it for all of us, but he left off a group of people there. He left off Christians, and he has a blatant disregard for Christians in all what he said about progression. I call it regression. And we talk about strong economies. Well, strong economies actually built on strong families, and families are, my dad used to say, the cornerstone of society. And we've got to value families. We've got to have a culture of life. And those things matter, and I think that they just have a blatant disregard. And they were in full flight, and the media got their soundbite and they ran with it.
Yep. Well, just a reminder that if you want to know where all the parties and all the party leaders, including the ones not currently in Parliament, that a whole lot of you are messaging me about throughout this hour, go to valueyourvote.nz. It's also contained on the website, valueyourvote.nz, and you can find out about the voting record of the existing MPs, and you can find out about what the party leaders think. Right, team, we are out of time. I think Ronji has actually dropped off to sleep, so as you can tell, he hasn't moved for the last 20 minutes. Michael, Sue, Ate, thank you. Great discussion. We got through virtually every topic that we had, one or two left over, so we'll come back to them next week. But have a great week, and to the viewers, thanks for watching. It's heating up towards the election, 47 days to go. So we will be back next Monday night at 8 p.m. Until then, you have a great week.
Yeah!